Been riding motorcycles for about the past 14 years. I started when I was 29. Now I'm 43, almost 44. So I'm currently riding with the bike that's behind me, and this is a BMW F800R. Bought it in 2015, brand new, and I think I'm at almost 11,000 miles. So I'm the only one in here waiting for some others to join. So my channel, whether it's the live stream or my videos I'm posting, my shorts, it's all about just giving tips to new riders or riders who are getting back into riding some time off. So I've had some time off really over the last 5 years, haven't ridden much. Between the past 5 years, I've had shoulder surgery that's kept me from riding a little bit. But then I recently, a few months ago, I had hip replacement. So the pain of needing that hip replacement kept me from riding, but now I'm back fully riding again, pretty much pain-free after the hip replacement. So it's about offer tips about riding because like I said, I've been riding for the last 14 years. There's those who are thinking about getting into riding or coming back from injuries. Because I mean, when I had to have a hip replacement, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to ride again, but I think it was 30 some days after hip replacement that I was able to ride again. So we got one question on here. How many times should you clean the chain a year? That's a good question. So I fully clean mine. I have a video on my channel. I fully clean my chain at the start of the season where I use a cleaning spray. I clean it all off, brush it off, fully cleaned, and then after that, I spray it with my just like a lubricant spray off and on. It just depends how much I'm riding. Usually it's once a week that I spray it with the lubricant chain. I usually don't do a full cleaning of the chain like I did at the beginning of the year, maybe once a month or so, maybe even a little bit longer, a full cleaning, but I spray it, put the lubricant spray on it once a month or once every couple weeks, I should say, depending how much I'm riding. But my channel is all about, if you're thinking about getting into motorcycle riding, it's an incredible hobby to get into. It doesn't have to be that as expensive as many think. I think I bought my first motorcycle for $1,500. It was a Ninja 250. When did you start age? So I started riding motorcycles when I was 20, I think I was 28, almost 29. I think that roughly in that range. And now I'm 43. I've been riding for about 14 years. So, like I said, my channel, I've only been posting on this, my BMW channel for a few months now. But it's all about, I'll have some ride videos on my channel as well as, but most of it's just like tips and things I've learned for riding over the last 14 years that I like to share. And if you're thinking about getting into riding, most the biggest roadblock usually, depending on what age you are, but usually it's money. But you can get into the hobby pretty cheap. If your first bike, you just get like a cheap used bike. Don't go for. I wouldn't go for a new bike. And I'm different than popular belief. I don't think it's. I would have killed myself if I got this bike, my first bike. I believe in starting like small, not necessarily maybe not a 250, but that's why I started on. But a 500, I think, is reasonable. Because it's not how big you are; it's about your experience level, but what you can handle. And that's why a lot of people end up having wrecks. Is they take on a bike that's way too powerful for them. So start off small. Like I said, I think it's reasonable. Not if 250 felt fine for me for one season since I bought it cheap, and then I pretty much sold it for almost what I paid for it from the start, and then I went to the 500. I think a lot of riders wouldn't be overwhelmed with starting on a 500cc bike. like I said, for mine, it was the Ninja 500, or if you're with like on a cruise or something like that, I still would be leery about starting on anything bigger than even a cruiser style more than the 500. So my channel is about, I've been riding motorcycles for 14 years. I've just offered tips and things I've learned over the last 14 years, and coming back from hip replacement. 3 months ago, I rode my motorcycle about 30 some days after hip replacement. I know when I had that hip replacement, I didn't, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to ride again, but it's, I'm just sharing my experience from coming back from injury. And if you have any questions, just share them on the chat. What is your favorite bike? What did you want to start? So my favorite bike is my current bike. That's the BMW F800R. I really like my Ninjas. Like I said, the Ninja 250, Ninja 500 were great. But the BMW F800R, they don't make the, BMW doesn't make this model anymore. They do a, say, 900, but it's, to me, it looks similar. They don't, I think what used to always set the BMW apart was having the gas tank at the back of the bike, which I don't think most of their models do that anymore. If any, I thought it was kind of a unique thing by BMW. But the 900 looks really nice. They switched the speedometer, tach, all that's 100% digital now. It looks really nice, 900 bucks. So my next bike's not going to be the 900. It's going to be the 1000cc. Well, they offer a couple of different ones, 1000cc naked bikes, which I think are really nice. So, if you're a new rider, because that's the, those are the things, I've been riding for a long time, but I've had times off from riding, or see the last 2 years, well, pretty much the last 5 years. I think probably I've ridden about 1,000 miles or less last 5 years because of injuries. Maybe it's more like 3 or 4 years, but it feels like in that range. But I've learned a lot in the past 14 years of riding, even though some of those years were limited. And one of those is, coming back from injury, and surprisingly coming back from hip replacement had me concerned to be able to ride again. I was in extreme pain before, but like I said, this year has been great. After post hip replacement, I've had zero issues riding this bike. So like I said, coming back from injury can be tough. I made it through that, and I think I'm already at like 700 miles this year for miles ridden. But anybody who joins the chat, we're talking about motorcycles. If you're a new rider, you have questions. I know I had a ton of questions come up when I was first learning to ride. Why'd you start riding motorcycles? Well, I always thought it would be fun. I started, I think it started when I was younger. I rode 4-wheelers, 3-wheelers. It was always fun doing that. So naturally, it just seemed fun to be able to get on a motorcycle and ride out on the road and do that legally. But didn't start doing that until I was 28, 29 years old. It just offers you a level, it's just a level of freedom and fun that a car can't offer. So, any questions anybody has? Like I said, if you're, like I said, I'm certainly no pro rider, but I'm ahead of those who are just starting or thinking about getting into riding. And my biggest thing is, don't start on a motorcycle that's way bigger than you need, because I think everybody gets that pressure to get on a much larger bike than you need to. Not necessarily physically large, but for the whatever CC, whatever it's at. You don't want to get anything. Everybody's trying to get like 1,000cc, 150 horsepower bike for their first motorcycle, which is definitely not a good idea. We'll take 1 second intermission here. Can you turn down your volume, Ronan? I can hear myself echoing. That's all right. You can exit, Ronan. Or just stay logged on, or you can exit completely. All right, we're back. So I've been posting on YouTube for a few months now on my motorcycle channel. Been riding motorcycles for about 14 years. Coming back after hip replacement. I think some people can relate to that, whatever injuries you may be coming back from. I've had shoulder surgery, hip replacement. All those things haven't kept me back from getting back on the motorcycle, which sometimes can be tough. But anybody has any questions about riding, or you're thinking about getting into riding? I know when I started riding the motorcycle, I had tons of questions. Of course, I was doing the 14 years ago. I was still going on YouTube, and there's a lot more motorcycle content out there now, that's for sure. But there's a lot back then too. I was watching everything I could find on motorcycle training videos, and of course watching all the ones where people get on motorcycles they can't handle and wreck them, or they're being stupid on them, and what not to do on a motorcycle. But if anybody in the chat has, on the live stream I should say, have any questions, you can just put them on the chat. I'll do my best to answer them, because I've learned some things over the past about 14, 15 years I've been riding. I think I can answer. Like I said, it's one of the things that kept me back from riding for a long time was the cost. And you can get into riding fairly cheaply. You don't have to. I wouldn't recommend this bike. I think I spent $10,000 on when I bought it new, but that was in 2015. But my first bike was $1,500. I think I sold it for $11 or $1,200 after having it for one season, so I didn't lose much. And then I bought the Ninja 500 after that, and then I didn't spend much on that either. I want to say it was either between $1,300 to $1,600 I spent for the Ninja 500, and I feel like those were great starter bikes. Both those bikes were the old school style Ninja, so they weren't cross rockets. You weren't leaning way over. I wouldn't be comfortable on that. This one bike here is a naked bike, so you're only leaning forward a little bit. You get some pressure on your wrists and stuff from the riding position, but it's not bad. It's a pretty comfortable riding position. It's not full out. If you want a cruiser style bike, obviously this is a little bit more leaned over than that's going to be. But it's your standard riding position of a naked motorcycle. I think it's pretty comfortable. Like I said, you can get into riding fairly cheaply. Like I said, the first two bikes didn't cost much. All this one, being my third bike, I spent a little more on it. Well, a lot more, $10,000 compared to between that 15 to 16, whatever range for the Ninja 500. And I think I ended up selling that for $1,300. So if you're looking to just get something basic, kind of something that's safe, but just a beater motorcycle to get started on, I think that's the best option. And most of the time, you're not going to want to keep that beginner motorcycle anyway. And so the things from my experience since I've been riding, the most and coming back after not riding much the last 2 years, only a little bit each season, the biggest challenge is, and the most common area where people wreck is on curves, and that's where the most challenge. It's pretty easy once you start learning how to switch the gears on the motorcycle to ride in a straight line. That's pretty simple. Most challenging part is getting used to maintaining your speed, taking those curves, leaning, trusting the bike to lean over. I'm not saying lean over so far you're putting your knee on the ground, but even a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice to get comfortable doing that. So any questions? So this whole chat is about just sharing information I've learned over my years of riding a motorcycle. Because like I said, when I started riding, I had tons of questions. I knew some people who were riding, but still tons of questions came up. I was looking for all over YouTube for videos on riding and teaching. There was a lot back then, but there's even more now. And then of course, watching all the YouTube videos of people doing stupid crap on their bikes or being on bikes that are too big for them, wrecking them. So do your research on what bike, if you're thinking about getting into riding, do your research on what bikes you're going to be comfortable on. If you have zero experience, like I was saying before, I still don't recommend, even though a lot of people disagree with me, I still don't recommend buying. It's hard for me to recommend anything over a 500, maybe a 600 max, if you're going like a cruiser style. If you're going 600 and you're getting a Ninja 600 and it's a cross track, then you're getting up there in horsepower. Most likely it's going to have over 100 horsepower. This BMW has, I want to say it's like between 92 to 95, maybe it's 95 horsepower, but it's my third bike. Like I said, I would say I would have killed myself just from lack of experience in this thing being overpowered. If I got this for my first bike, I would have been way too intimidated to not be able to handle this bike and learn to ride on it comfortably. So start off small, work your way up. I always recommend, even though nobody seems to want to start off low, on a smaller bike. But if you want to learn right, I would recommend starting off a smaller motorcycle and then go from there. Like I said, during my 14 years of riding a motorcycle, my channel is just all about those who are thinking about riding or interested in riding. I know when I started riding motorcycles, I had tons of questions. I was even 14 years ago, looking all over YouTube, training videos, looking, what's out there, watching all, the idiots taking on motorcycles that are too powerful for them, wrecking them. So my recommendation, if you're thinking about getting riding, motorcycle riding, you're 20 sometimes more likely to wreck, but it's still so much more safer than what the media puts out there. If you learn how to ride right. Like I said, I've been riding 14 years, never wrecked. I started on a 250, then I went to the 500, and then how the BMW F800R. This particular model they don't make anymore. The 900 is very similar. And then coming back after injury, if you're somebody, and I know many can relate, if you're coming back after injury, it can be tough. 3 months ago, I had hip replacement, but I was riding again like 30 some days after hip replacement. So if you're concerned about coming back, I don't want to re-injure something I had surgery on, which is understandable. But you can come back after those things. Like I said, I've come back after shoulder, hip replacement, and I've known some people who've come back after hip replacement as well. But all those things. My whole channel is just about sharing my knowledge on it. I'm certainly no pro, but we're 14 years. I've learned some things, and the people I see wreck, the reason that I haven't wrecked, I feel like, is because I've stayed within my capabilities on my motorcycle. I started on the Ninja 250, old school style, bought it for $1,500, sold it for almost the same amount one season. Ninja 500, old school style, bought it, I think, between I was saying earlier, $1,300 to $1,600. Then I sold it for, I can't remember, between $1,300 to $1,500. So the resale was really good on them as well. But each one I only used for a season. And then I moved up to my current bike, which was a huge upgrade, but huge from horsepower too, because I was the Ninja 500, I think, only has like 40 horsepower. This almost has 100. But if anybody watching, if you have any questions, you're thinking about getting into riding, I'm just sharing the information that I've learned over the years. Like I said, when I was learning, I had tons of questions, and I don't know where everybody's at who's joining the live stream, but in New York, I think it's pretty much, I'm not going to speak for other states or other countries, but in New York, so I got pulled over when I was first learning to ride because I just had a permit. And the cop comes, he says, "Oh, somebody reported you because you're going around the block." I was like, "Yeah." And I showed him the permit. He didn't give me a ticket, and I was like, "Oh, I can't ride." No, you have to have another person on another bike with a license, like they're going to do anything for you if they're on another motorcycle. But that's the permit process. You're supposed to have another motorcyclist ride with you, which I think is kind of funny. But that's part of the reason I took the MSF course. they teach you some great things to do at low speeds, and they give you the endorsement. You just take the DMV, and then you have your motorcycle license. At least you can ride legally. Because when I was done with the MSF course, I was still terrible at riding. It's a great course, but everything you don't go faster than 20 miles per hour in the MSF course. So I just learned how to. And before I went to that, I think I only ridden like 70 miles. But I was getting to the point where I wasn't stalling out the bike as much. So I was at that point, I was doing a little better, but I wasn't comfortable. They have you go in an oval, do some figure eights. I wasn't comfortable at all leaning the bike at any. But the kind of what I can relate to now, not riding much the last 5 years. Like I said, probably out of the past 5 years, my most I've ridden in one season, last 5 years, probably like 1,000 miles between all my injuries. But this year, putting on, I think I'm already at like 600-700 miles. I'm getting comfortable again, leaning the bike a little bit, getting comfortable doing curves and stuff. That's why I found the most difficult as a beginner, or coming back after having some time off, was taking those curves, getting comfortable leaning the bike over. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not out there professional motorcycle rider putting my knee down on the curves. Just a little lean takes some getting used to. But if you're thinking about it, getting into riding, just ask questions. If you have any things you're thinking about, any questions about anything about riding, any tips I might know, new riders may not know, because like I said, I've learned some things over the years, or what bike I recommend. Like I said, it's not a popular opinion, it seems, but I don't recommend getting a huge bike for your, maybe not, like I said, obviously physically huge, but power wise, I would stay a low CC. To me, I wouldn't go higher than a 600 if you're going cruiser, and I think it's kind of crazy to go to a 600 if you're going like cross rocket style, because you get up to 600. Most likely, if it's a cross rocket, if it's a 600, it probably has over 100 horsepower, and that's a lot of power for your first bike. This one has between 92 to 95 horsepower, and it still seems powerful to me. Over the last 10 years, I've gotten used to that. I'm definitely ready to upgrade, but I think that's going to be a couple years away, because I want to stick with BMW. Because anybody's like going back and forth, my Kawasaki's were great, but if you're going back and forth between brands, and if you have, obviously depending on where you are at money wise, how much what you're going to budget for it. If you want to spend that little bit extra money, I think BMW is phenomenal. They have cross rockets, they have cruisers. They have a bunch of naked bikes. I'm going to stick with a naked bike. They offer a couple 1,000cc ones. The next one from this one's, I think, 150 horsepower, which will be great. It actually has cruise control. So I have a couple shorts, I've mentioned it. So this bike, low annoyance, and I don't know if you'll ever get rid of it at any motorcycle. Get to a certain speed, you have decent amount of vibrations, just enough to make your hand fall asleep. And even on my left side, my non-throttle hand happens, and you try and pull your clutch in, and your hand's like frozen stiff, not from the cold, just from falling asleep from the vibrations from the bike. It can be kind of annoying. This bike doesn't have cruise control, so and I don't have like arthritis or carpal tunnel, but something to take into consideration. That is the nice thing about getting a bike with cruise control. You can take your hand off the throttle, have your hand rest. But that's probably the only issue I've had with this bike physically, is as far as comfortable. It's extremely comfortable with being a naked bike, but that vibration, just for some reason, it puts my hands to sleep, which can be a pain. So I can't always try to move my hand during it, and it doesn't have cruise control. But it's not unusual for this bike being 2015. It's 11 years old now, and only 800cc. But I'm just sharing information that I've learned over the 14 years of riding. I'm certainly no professional. If anybody has any questions or thinking about getting into riding, I think many will be surprised, how it's a lot cheaper than people think. And it's a lot safer than what everybody puts it out, what the media puts out there, because there's a lot of variables people don't mention. Yeah, you are 20 some times more likely to wreck on a motorcycle than a car, but there's so much crap that people don't mention that, oh, within the first 6 months, usually it's somebody wrecking that is on a bike too big that they shouldn't have been on to begin with, or, they're taking on curves too fast, or now they're texting and driving, or drinking and riding. So you taking all those out really slims down all the wrecks that are happening. But there are, like I said, I have close calls every year, but I've never had a wreck. All my close calls are because of cars. But just driving, you got to drive defensively and aware of what's going around. It's much safer. And I hear a lot from anybody I've mentioned to, oh, you should start riding. Oh, I have kids. I have kids and I still ride. You have to learn how to ride smart. I think the MSF course is great, but I still sucked after MSF course. I was terrible. And I just did that just so I could, I was saying earlier in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, just share them on the chat. I'll see them. I'm doing this on my phone, so I kind of have to look at the screen really close to see them. What was I saying? The MS. Well, I was riding. Saying earlier, I didn't realize. New York anyway. If you have your permit, you have to have another motorcyclist with a license ride with you. And I got pulled over. Oh, yes, no, you can't do that. So he didn't give me the ticket that time. So I just want my license. So at least I didn't have to depend on another rider. Oh, do you want to go out? And he went out. One of my friends went out with me a few times like that. But I just want my license. So if I want to at least go around the block, I can do that on my own legally without getting pulled over. But like I said, I was pretty terrible even after MSF course. But like I said, that's just the very basics. But anybody in the chat, if you're thinking about getting a ride, like I've been saying, repeat myself. My motorcycle channel is, the funny thing was, I had a camera when I first got this bike. I think it shot in 1080p, which is pretty good for, I think back in 2016. I hooked it up to my bike. I had some actual ride footage, and my whole intention was to post it on YouTube, and I didn't because I got a mic. I didn't like I couldn't figure out having good audio as I'm talking. I feel like some of my long form videos on my channel, my shorts, have pretty good audio setup. But if anybody's wondering what I shoot, if you check out my channel, I have a GoPro 13 hooked up to my helmet, and it's the Insta 360 camera. Usually I shot some videos today with it on the back of the bike. I have this little pole on the back, or a lot of times I'll put it at the front. But that's the Insta 360. I think it's the fourth one. The fifth one's the newest, but it's the fourth one. That'll still shoot 8K, and the GoPro 13 is the newest one, and that I was shooting 4K, 60 frame rates. But great, both those I've tested them, and I have a video coming out about it. I rode both those this week, and then the GoPro 100%. The GoPro 13 lasted longer than the 360, but both. The 360 was I don't remember the exact time. 360 I want to say was like an hour, and the other GoPro was a little over an hour for ride footage. So not nearly as much battery time as they try to say on all the the manufacturer's reviews and all that stuff. If anybody has any questions about motorcycle content, questions you're thinking about getting into riding, just put them in the chat. I'll give this live stream a thumbs up. That makes a big difference. With all how the algorithm pushes stuff, hopefully more people see it and slowly get people asking some questions in the live stream. I've had a few. This is my second live stream. Last week I had one as well. Had a few more questions last week than this week. I have to keep I'm going to keep the live stream to I'm at 29 minutes and 43 seconds now, but I'm going to go for 45 minutes. Keep it pretty short today. We're at the 30-minute point. I've had some different people jumping in and jumping out. Any questions? So I'm Sean. If you didn't hear my name before, I've been riding motorcycles for about 14 years. I started on the Ninja 250. I had that for 1 year. Pretty much bought and sold it for all, worked out almost even. Had the Ninja 500 for 1 year, and that was almost an even deal. Time I bought it and then resold it. I only lost a couple $100 between that time, and had it for a season. And then third bike is the BMW. I've had that since. I bought it in 2015. I had it since 2015. So like I said, my channel is just about sharing what I've learned over 14 years of riding. When I first started riding 14 years ago, I had tons of questions, and I was, even back then, YouTube had a ton of motorcycle content, even more now. But I was, searching for every tip and trick anybody, whatever videos posted, people were posting on there, on YouTube. Even now I watch a lot of motorcycle content. But I was, when I was just learning how to ride, I was searching for all the tips and tricks on YouTube that I could find. Watching all the, people taking on all the wreck videos to, the people post on there to scare you from riding. But my whole thing is, motorcycle riding is dangerous. Of course, it's more dangerous than a car, but the media pushes it that it's a lot more dangerous than people think. They try to push it. It's more so dangerous. But listen, I've ridden for over 14 years on a motorcycle. I've never had a wreck. Had close calls, but that's all because of cars, not looking out for me. But you just gotta ride defensively. But my channel is just about, if you've seen any of my videos, my shorts, it's just about offering tips. And if you're thinking about getting into riding or coming back from injury, you're not sure. Like I said, I was back on my bike riding again 30-some days after hip replacement. You can come back after those injuries. I said, I'm just going back to like when I was learning to ride. I had tons of questions. What's the best bike? How do I do this? How do I do that? Like I said, I'm no pro, but I think I've learned some things over the years that I can offer some insight to, to what some of the things I've learned over time, or things that I struggled with. But any questions anybody has about, if you're thinking about getting into riding motorcycles, just leave them on here. Listen, when I started riding, I had a ton of questions. And I wish some of it, I was always asking my friends and stuff, but anybody has any questions, you're thinking about getting riding, you're not sure which bike to get. I've learned some things. Like I said, I'm no expert, but I can share what I've learned. And over 14 years, and I've stayed alive on my motorcycle by being, you got to ride defensively, but learn how to ride your bike right. I did start off on a small motorcycle, and I know a lot of people don't like that. You gotta start on the biggest thing. But even though this bike's only an 800, if I started on this bike, I would have probably killed myself. Starting with almost 100 horsepower, and that's, I think, a lot of times that's what riders make that mistake. But any questions? Drop them in the chat section. I'll do my best to answer anything that comes up about riding. Coming back from injury, like I said, I just had hip replacement. Well, 3 months ago now, but I was riding again 30-some days after, and I know there was concern for myself, and I know others have it. I'm riding. Could I safely come back that quickly? And I've had no issues coming back. My hip has never felt better riding. That's what kind of has kept me limited, really, the past 3 years from riding, because I was in so much pain. But if you're coming back from injury, you're worried about those things. It's of course my doctor said it was okay, and even though I pushed it 30-some days, like I said, I've never ridden with less pain in the past 3 years. So if you're thinking about coming back from riding, or you're concerned, like the total hip replacement, I'm back to riding after 30-some days. Any questions about motorcycle expense? Motorcycle riding in itself, it's expensive as you want it to be. You could go out, at the time this was considered, to me, your first bike, I want to go out and spend $10,000 on a bike. Like I said, this was my third bike. It was about $10,000 brand new. I just think it's a mistake, and I'm not one of those people saying, "Oh, everybody's gonna wreck," because I've never wrecked. I've had many close calls. I mean, close calls happen to everybody. Just keep riding defensively. Learn how to ride right. Don't just take it easy when you're learning. All right, so I'm Sean. I've been riding motorcycles for 14 years now. So share my tips, and we have a question from. I already answered. I think it was a repeat question. We don't need joke questions. So live stream's been going about 36 minutes. I'm gonna go 45 minutes. But just share my experience, 14 years of riding motorcycles. Anybody thinking about getting into riding, they ask those questions on here. Like I said, I've learned a lot. I'm no pro, but any questions about, what's the best, size bike to ride on? What challenges I had when I first started riding? If you're in the United States, anyway, I can speak to the expense of it. You can actually, you can get into motorcycle riding fairly cheap. Relatively cheap, like I said, you don't have to, and I wouldn't recommend going buying a $30,000, $20,000 motorcycle for your first motorcycle. Start with something smaller, CC. I know everybody criticizes about going on a smaller CC bike to start, but I started on a 250, then a 500, then the 800 now, and my next one will be the 1000. So I recommend it. What has kept me alive when riding is I took my time. I didn't get on a bike that was too big. It has really helped me. And if you're in the United States, I think the MSF course is great, but I still sucked. When I got done with the MSF course, all it was I had my license. I could legally ride because in New York, I think it's the United States in general. If you have your permit on a motorcycle, you have to have somebody with a license on another motorcycle riding with you, or it's not legal. That's why I got pulled over when I had my permit on the motorcycle when I first started learning how to ride. That's why I basically just did the MSF course. So they teach some good tips and stuff, but it's all very low speeds. But I didn't realize, in New York, and like I said, I think in the United States, if you have your permit on your motorcycle, you have to have another person on another motorcycle who has a license to ride with you. It's like, I don't really see how they're going to help you. But that's why I took the MSF course. Like I said, it bypasses just, you get your endorsement, you take a DMV, and now you're licensed. So at least you can ride legally. Like I said, I still sucked after the MSF course because I had almost no experience. And if I guess that was my challenge. If you're learning I was learning on I think I said like 20 times in the live stream, the Ninja 250, the old school one. It had no, stabilization, anything like that. You're getting hit by crosswinds, and it's such a light bike. You're going 60, 70 on it. Well, that bike, it would take you a little bit to get up to 70. But the crosswinds would knock you all over the road. This bike have electronic stabilization really helps. You still get knocked around with those crosswinds. I think that's probably one of the biggest surprises I had when I first started riding was getting knocked all over the road from all the wind. I couldn't believe it. It's like I had to fight to stay. Of course, you had those days a little bit less windy. Then okay, this isn't bad. But then still, all of a sudden a big gust of wind comes, almost knocks you off the road. Can kind of take your confidence away. So if you're a new rider, just starting to learn, just take into consideration as you're learning. It's just take some practice to deal with crosswinds. Bigger bikes, of course, are a little bit, a lot better to handle that. We're at 40 minutes. We're going 5 more minutes. We'll see if we get any more questions, any more joke questions. That person was supposed to be not on the chat anymore. So we're finishing the live chat. Just give one last recap because we haven't had many questions today. So I'm Sean. I've been riding motorcycles since I was 28, 29 years old. It's about over 14 years now. Started on the 250, then 500, and then now last really 11 years I've been on this BMW F800R. It's a 2015. And then I'm here, anybody has any questions, you're thinking about getting into riding, or we believe everybody's saying your riding's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. I'm here to say, it's not too dangerous. It is more dangerous than a car. But there's, you learn how to ride right. Don't take on a bike that's too big for you. You can easily ride safely. Just take your time, learn your skills. That's why I've had many close calls. I've never wrecked in over 14 years. Just take your time. Don't take on a bike that's too difficult. And like I say, I hear a lot of times it's too expensive. It's not too expensive. Like I can speak. I'm in New York. I can speak to in New York. I picked up the Ninja 250 14 years ago for like $1,500. Sold it. Had it for a season. Sold it for almost the same amount. My second bike was the Ninja 500. Bought it for, I think, between that $1,300 to $1,600 range. Had it for a season, sold it, then got the BMW F800R. Like I said, that's most likely you're not going to want to keep your first bike. And I would recommend not buying a $20,000, $30,000 bike, your first bike, to learn on. Get something a little smaller, work your way up. But like I said, the whole idea of live chat is live stream is share some motorcycle information. Anybody has any questions that come up, you can ask them. So we finish out. We got about 2.5 minutes left. Anybody has any questions? Last final couple minutes. Let me know. Any questions about what to start on riding first? What's the process? How much? Like I said, in New York anyway, as far in majority of states, you're going to need motorcycle insurance. What are the costs? From my experience, what was my cost on it? Or cost on motorcycle? What's a good motorcycle to start on? Some of the challenges I've had when I first started riding a motorcycle, even 14 years ago, I was searching all over YouTube trying to find out as much as I could about riding motorcycles. So that's why I'm doing the live chat. Anybody has questions on motorcycles, I'll do my best to answer them. All right, let's say we got about 2 minutes left, not much time left. And then as well as coming back from injury, so I've shared a few times on here, many of us, especially, like I said, I started when I was 29 riding, now I'm 43. Last few years being limited on riding, I had hip replacement, total hip replacement. I was riding again in 30 some days. So I want to keep injuries from you starting to ride. Or people say that, I have kids, I can't ride. I have kids, I still ride my motorcycle. So my whole idea of this live chat is just anybody has questions about riding, ask them on here. Anybody has questions on my live chat on here about motorcycles, you're thinking about getting a ride, the cost of motorcycle, what's the good motorcycle to start on? I'll do my best to answer it. I've been riding, I'm certainly no professional, but I've been riding for 14 years. I just like to talk about motorcycles and share what I've learned. Because I know when I started riding, 14 years ago, I had a ton of questions. So I like to answer if anybody has any questions on getting into riding. Ask them on here. You're thinking about riding, coming back after injury, or what's a good bike to start on? And like I said, it's not a pot. Most people don't like it. I started on a Ninja 250. I still feel like starting on a smaller bike, may not necessarily be a 250, but I want to go out and buy something with 100 horsepower, 150 horsepower for your first motorcycle, and expect not to get hurt on it. Start off something small. I'm just going from what I've learned over my time of riding If anybody has those questions, just leave them in the chat. Like the live stream, but any questions on motorcycles, think about cost of them, leave them on the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to try to do this live chat once a week, and just as questions come up, I'll answer them. Hopefully it'll be helpful, because like I said, when I started first riding motorcycles, I had a ton of questions, and so that's why I'm here, trying to answer anything, share the information I've learned over time, and anybody else that can check out my videos and shorts on my channel as well. All right, we're at 45 minutes and 52 seconds. We are going to be done on our live stream for today. All right, thanks for watching. That is it. Bye.